Order the April 24th, 2023 Board of Directors meeting for the Kitsap Public Facilities District. And our first item will be public comment. Do we have any public?
Let me see here if I have any hands raised. I do not see anybody. The only hand I had raised was Director Havers to be promoted to panelist, which he is now. And let me check chat.
Okay, then we'll move on to item 3, which is the approval of the consent agenda. Do we have a motion?
I will move that we accept the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Darren, can you turn on your mic?
I move that we accept the consent agenda.
Okay, it's already been seconded. Then discussion? No discussion. All in favor of approving the consent agenda?
Aye.
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 And any opposed? Approval of the consent agenda passes. And item 4 is the facility project report. We have no report this month?
No report this month, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Then we'll move right down to item 5, general business. And this will be the Public Facilities District in Kitsap County ILA Amendment number 3.
Correct. And you also have it in front of you. I printed out for you that those are here. The other board members should also have that in front of them as well. This is the ILA Amendment number 3 with Kitsap County. This is adding an additional $350,000 to the original ILA, which was a request that the county had made a few months back. And so the board had instructed me to work with the county to get that ILA amended. I worked with our legal counsel, Mr. Lawler. They worked with their legal counsel, and we came up with the final draft. So what you have in front of you to vote on for approval is the finalized draft of the ILA Amendment number 3 for KPFD in Kitsap County.
Okay, do we have a motion for approval?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second it.
Okay, do we have any discussion? No discussion. Then all in favor of approving the ILA number 3 for Kitsap County and PFD? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Nope. So the ILA passes. Our next item of general business will be the Public Facilities District on the Port of Bremerton Letter of Intent.
Yeah, I'm getting to it right now. A lot to that amendment. Okay, here we go. So, Mr. Chairman, at our last board meeting, I was instructed by the board to work with the Port of Bremerton on crafting a letter of intent based upon the request of $10.25 million to help to fund the Circuit and Northwest Public Events Center as part of the Port of Bremerton project. So what the board has in front of them is that letter of intent. It also has a breakdown of the funding amount that is being requested. On this letter of intent, let me go back to beginning on it. I worked with Mr. Rothman from the Port of Bremerton, and we worked with our legal counsels on both ends to craft this final version for your review. and for a vote. So the funding amounts that you see there in number 3 of the LOI is what was requested by the Port of Bremerton on the annual, and then based upon what the annual is on the monthly. It's stretched out over a 14-year period of time, so you can see what the monthly payments to the Port of Bremerton would be. This does not require us to go secure a bond. We would just simply be making payments to the Port of Bremerton totaling $10,250,000. Item number 4 has the conditions that are associated with each one of those, with the funding itself. And then the final piece of that is that the LOI is non-binding, merely an outline of possible terms and conditions with the Port of Bremerton and KPFD. So that is now in front of you for consideration.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Could we have a little discussion on it first? Are we doing that?
No,
or
we do a motion first.
Okay.
I'll move that we approve the Port of Bremerton letter of intent dated April 24, 2023.
Do we have a second?
I guess I'm a little, do we need to second in order to discuss the
Yes.
the cash flow?
Yeah, we have to,
Okay, I'll second so we can discuss the cash flow.
okay. Now discussion. So who would like to start?
I guess my concern, I don't have a problem per se with the ILA. My concern is more of a general structure going forward. And I understand this is a non-binding LOI and all. But let's say, just looking at these total amounts that we get in, and I do like the caveats that are in here so that the port understands, about the risk and all that. But let's say we get in 2030, we've got our commitment. At that point, we've paid a couple million in, and then we can't afford to do it. Revenue's down, whatever the issue is. I guess I want to see from the port, what does that mean for the project? Have we invested $2 million that's now down the drain? Or does that mean, hey, we've now so heavily invested in this project, we need to see it through to the end no matter what? So I guess just going forward, again, no issues with signing a non-binding LOI, but I'd like, before firm ILAs or anything get further discussed, kind of a structure of what happens if these negative contingencies actually occur, both to the project, because I'd hate for them to dump a bunch of money and relying on us, and then we have to pull out for various reasons, or are there alternative funding mechanisms and things along those lines?
Okay, we have additional discussion?
So the attached spreadsheet to this is pertinent to this document, correct?
Correct. You want me to bring that up?
Yeah, would you bring it up, and then Russ, I'm thinking it's easier if maybe you walk through it for all of us to make sure we understand it correctly.
You're talking about this one right here that's on the screen now, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And actually, I'm going to let Northwest Municipal Advisors speak to it. They can speak to it far more intelligently than I can, so let me promote them. Well, they should be promoted. Let me make sure that they have the ability to be able to speak to it. They do. So Melinda, Scott, or Ryan, if you'd like to speak to it, please.
Yeah, so again, Scott Bauer, Northwest Municipal Advisors, and I think I'll have Ryan go through a bit of the details. But this, I think, is a spreadsheet that we have shown a couple of times. So on the far left side of the spreadsheet has the historical tax revenue that have been received, and then an estimated growth of that tax revenue. The revenue change assumed in this model is there at the top at the 2.5%. We also then escalate the operating expenses and then provide an amount of revenue available to pay for projects and debt service. We've put the PFD's existing debt service there on the left side in yellow. So those are the bonds already outstanding that Kitsap County has issued on behalf of the PFD. And then there's a column, again, just to the left of the yellow, that is the estimated Port Orchard payments. So those would be full debt service. For purposes of this column, we've assumed kind of a worst case scenario, again, as we're trying to figure out who is going to ultimately issue that debt. In this case, again, showing worst case, we've assumed it's the PFD that would be issuing that debt. So there's a higher interest rate associated with it. There's a reserve account associated with it, in addition to simply then funding the project. We then have the other project payments listed there in the middle colored sections. So we've got the Port Orchard Event Center. Again, those are existing cash flow payments in blue. We've got the estimated Polsbo Event Center there in green. So again, that assumes that it's a bonded amount and that the PFD pays those payments then to Polsbo. We have then Port Gamble Heritage Park. That was previously shown as an amount at the end because we were having trouble fitting that into as cash flow payments. But we, I think, heard over this past month, got a sense of when they would need the funding and how much that would be. So now we've shown that as cash flow payments. We have the existing Port of Bremerton Circuits to Northwest payments there, $143,144 per year. And you can see then in a column of change in net position, that's just meaning that, if you see a positive number, then that's adding to your net position. If there's a negative number, then we're depleting your fund balance. And then finally, the last purple column there is the request. So that should be the same structure payments that you see in the LOI. Ryan, anything to add?
No, I think the only thing I'd say is that all those projects are ranked in the order in which we've heard from the district in which they prioritize those. And yes, I think any updates you see to this is based on, I guess, some of the things we've heard from either the county and the city of Polsbo, I think, since the last time we talked.
I have a quick question for Scott or Ryan, actually. So if the Circuit Northwest, if we were to agree to this, would the amount that we're paying them, even though it's non-binding, count against us if we had to bond on our own in, let's say, 3 to 4 years? Would they say, you're already paying this out? It's going to count against how much we can bond or what our interest rate will be? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I think the two impacts, for one, we would assume that payments to Port of Bremerton Circuits to the Northwest and some of the other projects would be at a lower priority than anything that gets bonded. We assume that bonded debt will be paid first, and then everything else will come after that. So that's, I guess, part one. Part two is simply, the rating agencies will look at impact to fund balance, I guess. So to the extent that, we've reduced fund balance because of any of these payments, that'll just be one of the metrics to be looked at. But again, we're assuming that as far as priority of your annual cash flow, that'll go to bonded debt first, and then other project payments will be made.
So how would this affect bonding? Would it give us a higher interest rate we'd have to pay or make it more difficult to lower the amount we could bond?
Well, if your fund balance is lower, then I would expect you to have a lower rating and a higher interest rate. However, I think having this amount, again, then setting aside anything about fund balance, I think having these project payments where they're at, I think may be discounted by the rating agency, meaning that, they would understand that you're your cash flow first goes to, your annual cash flow first goes to the bonded debt. So again, I don't know if there'd necessarily be an impact because we've layered in this, so long as there's an understanding that if you have a fund balance limit, for instance, and we don't want to go below that then project payments potentially stop.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Scott and Ryan, it's John here. I had a question on this. Are there multiple iterations of this spreadsheet? Say, like, if I wanted to see one that did not include this additional ask from the port, what that would look like and what our ending fund balance would look like? I assume at the end we can't have a negative 7.7 million ending fund balance, correct?
Well, that's correct. That would be showing that you don't have enough money to make all the payments shown here. So yes, I mean, this model can be updated in any number of ways. So as I've mentioned before, and I think consistent with the modeling that was done prior to this model, we've put in a conservative 2.5% revenue growth rate. So to the extent that that's higher, to the extent project payments, are not as shown in this model, then that will lead to a different model output and may then provide a different conclusion.
I guess to be more specific, I'm looking to see if you had something handy that if I took out the request for Port of Bremerton, I think what I'm trying to get at is, if I'm reading this correct, I'm still going to have negative fund balances the way we have it, even if we take this request out. Is that accurate?
That's not accurate.
No? Okay. I'm just curious, and I didn't know if you guys have that in Excel and could take that column out so I could see what those ending fund balances would look like without this request.
I'll try to pull it up here as we're talking, John, but what you do have is I guess, negative cash flow, I guess, in that sense, where in certain years, I guess if you see the first column for the change in net position where we see the negative numbers in that particular column, you're using your fund balance during certain years to make the payments that you have scheduled. Some of these are still very tentative, including Paulsbo, Port Orchard. I mean, really, a lot of them are very tentative. But the way we've modeled it, you do not have a negative fund balance.
Okay, so if I take out the request for the port, and I'm just looking at ending fund balance from 2026 looks negative, I guess that probably is not something that we can do, right, in any 1 year, let alone the end balance at the very end in 2041. But I'm looking at 2031, for instance, right? Looks like we would possibly still have that, a negative fund balance at the end of that year, even if I don't take these payments into consideration.
I will pull it up to show it to you here if I can. Okay. But before putting in, I guess, this additional request, I worked in priority level, and so this being the last priority, I'd make sure that there was enough fund balance before putting this piece in.
Okay, thank you.
So to understand the differences on red negative numbers, one being the change in net position affecting how much cash reserve we've got at the PFD level. So we have, right?
The change in net position is how much revenue you bring in any particular year and how much goes out in any particular year. So in 2026, it just takes the revenues from 2026 and subtracts out your expenses in 2026.
Okay, so
and that's the part that then changes your fund balance.
Right. So in 2026, we're at 435,881. So if we went into that year with is that correct? If I'm looking at the change in net position number, negative 435,881.
Correct.
For 2026. Okay, so at kind of building on to what John said, then if we've got, let's say, $3 million going into that year, at the end of the year, we're at 2,000,005. We're a little under.
There you go. That's
okay.
right. Okay. And this spreadsheet currently, the far right column shows fund balance. So
right.
The
and
number
I think
under
that's
the line.
Yeah, I understand exactly because I had the same question as John. If we if the Port of Bremerton was not moving forward, where's our fund balance? Do we ever end up in a negative on the fund balance with those other projects as they're currently laid out, knowing that we're making a lot of assumptions on this layout? Because if I'm looking at this, there's a lot of red, and red's a no-go because we can only get income from one way, and that's from sales tax. Is there anything we're not understanding about the red on this?
No, I mean, again, I think you understand it based on, again, the 2.5% growth, the project payments as we laid it out here. And yeah, so then again, negative net position means we're depleting fund balance, and then we get to that far column and where you see the negative fund balance, then yes, you have negative money in the bank to not put it well.
Right, yeah, okay.
Yeah, because I think I was trying to, I'm right there with you, Aaron, right? I'm just trying to do this math right here, because even before I take into account the Port of Bremerton, right, starting in 2026, we have a negative change in net position of 435,881. And when I add all those numbers up, that's almost 1.6 million. And even before we took into account, it looked really tight in the fund balance. So,
yeah, I mean, to me, this spreadsheet says two things. One, it says that the projects that we've got with the assumptions on them, funding at this kind of a conservative level, which is exactly, or making this assumption at this is, sorry, my screen went black. Being conservative about it, we're looking at this saying, okay, we're going to have to tweak timing on the other projects. And then I look at the purple column for the funding for request for the Port of Bremerton project, and I don't see how these numbers work at all.
Russ, will you allow me to share my screen?
Yeah, you should be able to. Let me stop my share.
So I think it may be hard to see here. And I guess let me know if you can't see it.
No.
But sharing this example now where we pull out all of the new request dollars here, you can see you start off with $2.5 million and you work your way down. So in 2025, without the new request, you have $2.3 million in the bank projected. And then even though we have a series of negative years, we still stay, I guess, fund balance positive in every year.
this is exactly what I was looking for. Thank you,
Yeah.
Ryan.
Yeah.
And then again, this is Walt. So without the Port of Bremerton project funding, with this, we diminish our fund balance until what it looks like about 2032, and then it starts to maybe climb up a little bit.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of assumptions that we're making in this. So, using, I guess, a conservative approach to the revenues coming in, and then a lot of the unknowns that we have regarding where, how these other projects are going to be paid. There are certain years where it certainly will, we're going to be using, where maybe you may be using fund balance to support the projects until we can then, until either revenue comes up or certain debt falls off the books.
Okay, do we have any more questions? Discussion. I have one more question if no one else has any. And I don't know if this is something that you can answer. So the Port of Bremerton money out of the fund balance would be, I guess, like the junior money, correct? It would be paid out after everything else is paid, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I would view it.
If we weren't able to pay that, would that affect our credit rating? Even though it's like the junior commitment we have? And I don't know
Well, I
if that's
guess
more a
the
legal.
question might be why you're not able to pay it. If you've depleted fund balance, then yes, I think that could impact your, that will impact your rating.
Okay, so it would count against us, you would think, even though it's a very low commitment?
Well, again, I think the commitment is to make payments to the extent you can. I guess I need to take a look at the ILA again here, but so I guess I could see how it could count. I mean, I think we'd have to make it crystal clear in all agreements that, you know, similar to some of the other project payments, that it is below any bonded debt, and I think we would need to have a fund balance minimum.
Okay. I guess what I'm trying to get at is if we aren't able to pay that, how it would affect the Public Facilities District with their
Right.
bond rating.
Well, again, if you said I can't pay it because I have a fund balance minimum of $2 million, then maybe you're fine with the rating agencies. If you say I can't pay it because I've run out of money, then I think that will impact your bond rating.
Okay, thanks. Do we have any more questions, discussion? Okay. We'll move on to voting. All in favor of the Kitsap Public Facilities District and the Port of Bremerton letter of intent? Okay, all those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Aye.
Nay.
Or nay. Sorry.
Okay. So no for and all opposed, it sound like. And now we'll move on to item C, which is the building signage replacement.
Mr. Chairman, as you'll recall, when we moved into our new space, we had a sign that was put up, and it was with our old logo. And so now that we've approved a new logo and a new tagline, and I also have some information about that I'll share with you very quickly. This is where it currently looks at. These two windows right here actually belong to Kitsap Public Facilities District, so this is a small logo. Obviously, it's really kind of hard to see. So what I asked was give us some kind of a model, what it would look like if it takes up the entire space, which is what you see here. Now, of course, this is just a rendering, but you can see it would have our new logo. It would say Kitsap Public Facilities District, and then it would have our tagline, Building Communities, Enriching Lives. But there's a cost associated, of course, with getting rid of the old sign and then replacing it with a new sign. And so the cost estimate I got was $4,198 from Hanson Signs. They're the ones that had installed the previous one. So I would like for the board to consider approval of the funds to put up the new logo underneath our office space.
Question, if I may ask, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
Executive Director Shiplett, wondering about, do we have permission to use the space underneath the other windows?
We do, and this is actually with the approval of Mr. Nelson, who owns the building. He actually is the one that approved this, what you see in there in front of you. And again, he's got that window on the end is not ours, so everything would shift over. Ours is the next two windows over here. So all of it would shift over.
Okay, so it would shift to the right.
Correct.
Yeah, I like that much better than what we have right now, because the scope, the size of what we have right now, if you have seen it for the rest of the board, it's barely noticeable. You know, like from a distance, you're not going to see it, and this would actually be a sign that you could see.
Correct. And I want to point out, too, that we, in this year's budget, we do not have a advertising or marketing budget. We'd removed it and moved funds to something else. I talked to the executive committee about this, and we have $15,000 earmarked for event fund, but we haven't spent any of that this year. There has not been any applications. I believe there will be one application coming up in June for the November, December timeframe, but the thought was that we could utilize $5,000. Well, we wouldn't need that much, but we could utilize the $4,198 out of the event fund, since we know that we won't spend that all.
Executive Director Shiplett, can I ask a question? Is this a lighted sign?
No, it is not lit. It is not lit, but it will have the white background, so you can see that. As a matter of fact, none of the signs on the buildings themselves like this are lit, only the ones that are down below.
Is that something that we looked into and it was cost prohibitive, or is there some kind of lighting that we can put up on it? I would just love for us to be able to be seen in the evening as well.
I agree. I think it had something to do with running the electrical up that way. But what I'll do is I'll check with the building owner, Mr. Nelson, and see what the possibility is about that. And then if there's a change in price, of course, of getting it lit, then I will let you all know, and then you can make the decision on whether or not we want to approve the additional expenditure it would take to make it a lit sign.
I know that when I had some sign do it for my firm for an exterior sign, it was almost double the price of an unlit sign, if not more than that. So just, you know. And now, what other lighting is there? I mean, you know, if it's well lit for other reasons, I know there's a restaurant in that building and so forth. I don't know if the sign itself needs to be the building itself is.
Yeah, there's something that tells me that we couldn't do it, because I think I asked that question when we had the first sign put up. But I'll get clarification before I say positive to that on whether or not we can get it lit or not.
Another way of lighting it too that I'd like to ask that you look into, if the sign itself is not lit, you can always have flood lamps that highlight that at night. And so if you could look into both of those options.
Mr. Chair, knowing all that, and there may be additional discussion, I'd like to make a motion to approve the sign as is, so he could move forward. And if there is the ability to light, I'd like for Executive Director Shiplett to bring it back to the board.
Real quick, before we move on there, so this is, I'm assuming, well under what we have to send out for bid?
It is under what we have to send out for bid, correct.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know Mr. Lawler was here, so I apologize. I'm jumping right all over you.
Okay, then do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion?
This is Walt. I have a comment. I think the building communities, enriching lives, frankly, makes it a little bit busy. I would rather eliminate that and make the Kitsap Public Facilities District letters larger to take up that same space.
Well, this is Darren, and I would say the opposite, because if it's Kitsap Public Facilities District, I think it's more of a yawn for people who are passing by, but maybe, and maybe this is hopeful, but the tagline of building communities, enriching lives might grab people's attention and make them say, oh, what does the Kitsap Public Facilities do? I've never heard of them. So that is what's in my head. I was going to say the exact opposite comment that you were going to say, that I like that we can expand it because I like having the tagline at the bottom.
Well, Darren, I respect your opinion. I'm a little doubtful whether it's going to grab people or not, but who knows?
I'd like to keep it for the reasons Darren said. Just that's my opinion.
I will say the same.
Is it possible that it's just the mock-up that makes it look busy? Will it have white background below the tagline and not above?
I don't think so. And quite honestly, I'll have to ask on that. I think they highlighted it in white simply because it was kind of hard to read. But I'll find out for sure on that, because I'm with you. I don't want to look super overly busy as well. But I'll find out what the final would look like if it includes the white background on that.
Any more discussion? Okay. All in favor of approving the new signage?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And before this gets carried out, you'll come back with the lighted estimate also?
I will.
Okay.
I'll share it with the board. One thing I wanted to say too is that Mr. Lawler helped tremendously with getting it trademarked, the building communities and enriching lives, and the logo itself. So he's got the application put together. I just need to get the county to give us a check for $55 that I can send to make it official. But building communities, enriching lives is not a current trademark, so it would belong to us.
Okay, with that, then we'll move on to item 6, which is executive session. And Kitsap Public Facilities District Board will now meet in executive session to discuss performance of a public employee per RTW 42-30-110-1G. The board will be in executive session until, what time is it now? 6:08. And we do 15-minute increments, Mr. Lawler?
Whatever you think is necessary. It doesn't have to be 15 or 10 or 20 or 30. It's whatever you think is a fair estimate. I suspect 15 is on the short side.
Okay. Then the board will be in executive session until 6:25 p.m. And the board is not expected to take further action following the executive session.
Recording stop.
I call the regular meeting back to order, and we will adjourn the regular meeting at this time.